Proposition 22. Fuck. This one is hard. Pardon me.
And that's it. And that's our show. That's our show. That's our show. Thank you. Vote yes or no. Who knows?
I don't know. It's like one of those ones that I'm actually really afraid of getting wrong. I mean, I already voted, but it's only tough because there's so much money being pumped into gaslighting people about this one, and I at least, I tried. I really tried to like reach out to people who this directly affects and get like an aggregate position, or kind of just compile what people's opinions were and just see what and what I discovered was that for some of the people who rely on gig work, they know that they're being taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
They know that they're working 3 jobs, if you can call them jobs, and that they're constantly on the road and they're constantly having to put money into maintaining their vehicle and walking on eggshells and taking shit from strangers and making sure that they keep their rating high and everything else. And they do it anyway because they are in a position where they're desperate for the money, or they do it to pay for the car, which, they may just break even on that, but they need the car to get to their other jobs. Or so there is a lot of apprehension and fear that Uber and I don't know, what's the other one? Lyft. Lyft is the less evil of the two, but it's still pretty bad.
It's got the pink mustache or whatever.
So this is a like an exception, as far as I understand it, because it's really hard to read what this is. But it would be, if it passes, it would allow an exception to an existing law that had gone into effect.
Yes.
About not allowing the gig work scam to continue, where they basically, there's companies out there that rely on independent contractors, and then they can limit their liability for what these people do,
right?
And then they don't have to pay for health care or for sick leave or all the things that California has done to make someone who works a job's life a little better. So this had already passed, and if 22 passes, then it allows an exception for certain types of gig work, like we're saying the Ubers and the Lyfts, and I assume DoorDash, although they haven't pumped as much money into pushing this as Uber and Lyft have. But so there's a lot of anxiety about this from people who, Uber and Lyft have threatened to pull their business out of California. And there's people who, rely on taking Uber or Lyft to get places that are, experiencing anxiety over what happens if this doesn't pass and Uber and Lyft make good on their threat. And I don't think that it's a good policy of mine to make a decision based on being held hostage or the fear. I think it's the right thing to do to take care of people who work for you, who make you a lot of money, and I think they're bluffing. I really do. I don't think they're going to pull out of California. Especially since, there's a lot of talk that this is a stopgap. Human employees are a stopgap anyway until they get until they put enough money into the lobbyist, or as lobbyists, they put enough money into it so that they can go fully automated. I don't think that they intend to keep human employees employed or contractors employed as soon as they have a fleet of self-driving cars that they can legally operate. So,
and of course, California is the biggest single market for these services in the country, right? I mean, we're the biggest state. Yeah. Most people, it kind of rings hollow.
Yeah. So I don't believe their threat. And so I didn't compile a whole lot of data because a lot of it's bullshit anyway. I mean, there's really no way. It's such a hypothetical. I can't tell you the financial impact on California. I can't tell you any of that. I can tell you if they do pull their business from California, and a lot of people who rely on driving for Uber and Lyft no longer have a job, and people who rely on taking Uber and Lyft no longer have a source of transportation that they've become reliant on. I don't think that's going to happen, but I don't know, and that's why it's still one that I have anxiety about. Did I get it wrong? Did I vote incorrectly on this? But I don't know what you guys think.
Which is their goal, right? With spending the $190 million or more, is to basically scare people.
Yeah, and what if they had just taken all that money and put it into treating people correctly? I mean, wouldn't that be great?
$190 million would have gone a long way to give their employees, as they say, independent contractors, a leg up, especially during the pandemic.
I wonder how many independent contractors are in use in California by these companies.
Well,
I mean, it's basically all of them. Looked up. Right? Now I look like an asshole.
No, that's okay. Don't worry about it.
I don't know. Let me look that up. That's probably what I should. I just had so much anxiety about what's the right call on this one that I did a lot of people polling. I just asked, and I asked friends of friends, and I put
No, that's valuable information to have.
Absolutely, yeah. It's more than I have.
Because I don't have any friends, so.
Well, they're all here.
Yeah, just you guys, and neither of you work for Lyft, so I don't know.
Neither do all the Lyft drivers. So.
But your point.
They're independent contractors.
That's right. Yeah. Your point about the automation rings very true to me. We're sort of in a transitionary phase where these companies just so happen to need human workers to exist, but
to teach the machines.
You're not far from the truth, and they're very obviously making inroads to eliminate those human workers. I mean, that's pretty clear, right? I mean, so I think that in and of itself demonstrates that they don't really give a shit about the human worker. And so if you read all of their propaganda on this proposition, they're spinning it as if this is a positive thing for the worker, and they're pushing it as if you're giving freedoms to the worker by doing this, which seen through the lens of this other thing that we're doing, which is promoting automation. They're fucking full of shit is what it comes down to, right? They're just it's so blatantly full of shit. So
Well, you don't sink $190 million plus into a campaign for something like this unless you have a lot of money at stake.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of money at stake. Yeah, but even if you ignore all of that, like just don't even consider it. Just the fact that they're doing this automation thing over here on the side, and then they're making the argument, oh, but we're all about the worker. Yeah, fuck you. Get out of here. That's bullshit. And so there's that. But I think regardless of that, there's a much bigger issue here at play, which is these companies, hypothetically could be out of the market for human workers in a decade. But we have to live with whatever decision is made via this proposition for a lot longer than that. And so what things will fall out of this thing that we think applies to just Lyft and Uber, years from now? Does it loosen?
Well, yeah, because we don't know how they're going to write it and codify it either. I mean, it's the ballot proposition has a certain thing that it says it's supposed to do, but a lot of that then has to be translated and codified into law.
Oh no, the language for the ballot is written. So
is it,
or is for the proposition is written? Yeah. So that what's written gets codified, but
but John's correct though in that the way that it translates into regulations will there'll still be that regulatory phase of it.
And maybe that's
so the law is written, but the implementation of it will have to.
That's right. And
whatever
then
state agency is going to be in charge.
There will be court cases, undoubtedly, of other companies saying, well, hey, this applies to us, or they're getting something special and we're not, and we want that. And so you have this potential effect, right, for it bleeding over into all of the other sort of worker protection law that exists. And so does this weaken the whole thing?
Yeah, it does.
I think. I think there's
maybe not precisely legally, but it does in thinking about the concept of
it at least
what
opens
is a worker
the door for a
lot
of litigation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
in a way,
thinking about what protection should we provide to workers, and this is getting to the point where we're saying, well, okay, this stuff doesn't really matter. I mean, it's stuff like workers' compensation insurance. So right now, if you get injured on the job, right, your employer is supposed to take care of that. It's paid sick leave. It's what was the other one? Oh God, I'm drawing a blank. Workers' compensation insurance. Unemployment insurance. That's a big one too, especially now.
I'd like to real quick address Amy in our audience. You are correct. California has already passed legislation about contract employees, and so this proposition would be, what would you call that? It's not an amendment.
This is a referendum.
A referendum.
This is a referendum on AB 5. Yeah.
So what it would do is it would modify the previous legislation to allow exceptions that are the way that it's worded is, obviously aimed at Uber, Lyft, and like I said, I'm sure DoorDash, Instacart, or whatever. A lot of the things that follow a similar business model.
Mm-hmm.
But
if it does pass,
it's also right that law originally passed a year or two ago. It had much more broad impact than just the kind of the Uber Lyft stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in fact, Uber and Lyft had said they were going to pull out of California, and they paused that because they were given temporary, a temporary stay or extension of having to implement the law because there was this proposition,
right?
Which they paid to get on the ballot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
right
now they're operating under a a legal exemption that's temporary until this either passes or fails.
Right. As I understand it, California has become very strict in what it deems an employee versus a contractor.
Mm-hmm.
And to be a contractor in California, you have to pass a very fine set of requirements, or rather, I should say it the other way. To be an employee in California, it's a very broad set of requirements, right? So like, you're almost always considered an employee in California, with few exceptions. And those exceptions have to do with whether you are directly managed, or like a regular contractor. You can think of it as like for instance, in my field, a contractor that we would hire would be somebody who say, we have this unit of work that needs to be done. We're going to give it to you, and it's up to you to decide how this unit of work needs to be done, but we're going to provide you with a set of requirements,
like
right?
specs,
like
right?
specs. Yeah, exactly.
Rails, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
it's means and methods,
right? And then so that would be a contract type relationship, and that would be allowable under California law. But if we were to say, we want you to do it this way, and we're going to
in our building
to manage
with our equipment,
exactly, yeah, then it becomes an employee.
Yeah.
And so the criteria is pretty clear most of the time, where you fall on this, whether you're an employee or a contractor. And so it's pretty clear under current California law that people driving for Lyft and Uber and whatnot are employees. It's really no different than a driver for a pizza delivery person, or a pizza delivery.
Except for the fact that Uber and Lyft don't think that they should be responsible or liable if their driver kidnaps and rapes somebody, or and they're not responsible for if their driver murders somebody, or
paying unemployment
or if
insurance.
their driver gets raped or murdered.
Right.
That they have no responsibility for that either.
Yeah.
So they're not incentivized to vet, or they're more worried about your star rating than whether you've kidnapped and raped people before.
I think it's one thing for Uber and Lyft to perceive themselves. They can perceive themselves as whatever the hell they want. But at the end of the day, this is about how we as citizens perceive the concept of a worker in California. I don't know. I think where we are and what benefits we do get are in compared to like Europe, for instance. We kind of get shit, but we still get a lot better than what would be the potential if like everybody were just straight contractors. And I know that's the libertarian wet dream or whatever, where everybody's just responsible for themselves and whatever. Come on, guys.
So my fear, or maybe it's not a fear, but what's to stop Uber and Lyft, if this referendum doesn't pass, from just reworking their business model in California? I'm sure there's somebody that can figure out a way that, okay, well, so we don't have drivers. Uber and Lyft in California don't have drivers, but what we do have is we have a service where we connect people with people who are out driving around, and then provide them with a way to directly bill those people. Like, in other words, so the drivers are now paying a service charge
So
to connect with this network that, you know what I mean? Like, there's got to be a way that they can get around.
Well, but the other option, of course, is that they
Well,
treat
that's why
the
I
people
don't
like
want
employees,
that's
right?
why I don't want it to pass. Like I said,
Yeah.
I really hope that it doesn't pass, because they're going to find a way around it if they want to continue to operate in California, but they're just going to have a much harder time doing it. And I think people are going to feel even less like comfortable with the fact that they're not getting a ride from Lyft. They're getting a ride from
Joe.
Yeah, Joe rapes women. That's
Right.
that's his last name. Joe rapes women. Directly, and paying, like paying that person directly for the ride, and they're also then, that driver then has to pay a surcharge to Lyft for making the connection between rider and driver. You know what I mean? Like,
in that case, it's a finder's fee.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
Two things I wanted to mention. One, there's kind of this myth that you can actually make money being a driver for Uber and Lyft, but some studies that I've looked at, and even some articles I've read from people that say, hey, how much can I make? How much do I make? They go out and do, drive for Uber and Lyft for a week, whatever. So one article I found was about a guy in Florida who drove for a week. He documented everything, mileage, how much money he made, all that stuff. So he made like $250 gross pay in 14 hours. But once you take into account all the wear and tear, the gas, the insurance, everything on the car, he ends up making $89 in 14 hours, which is like $650 an hour, right? And even at that time, this is a year ago, even at that time, minimum wage in Florida was $8.64. So after expenses, the guy was making $2 an hour less than minimum wage, and maybe a little more reputable than my quick math based on an article. The New School in UC Berkeley did a study last year that found that on average, drivers in the Seattle area made $9.73 per hour. I went back real quick and looked at the Seattle minimum wage, and it was anywhere from $12 with benefits to about $16 an hour. So they were making significantly less than minimum wage,
right?
Doing this, and that's just, and minimum wage is, it's supposed to be the minimum. I mean,
No, what it ultimately is.
You're not wrong, but there's kids making Reebok for 50 cents a day. So,
fair enough, but my proposition vote can't really solve that problem.
No, I know, but I think that, like I said, for a lot of people, this is what they do to make up the fact that they're not going to make they're just not going to make it on their other job. So for a lot of people, it's a second gig, and it's how they, put diapers on their kids.
And I want to be clear, I'm not saying they shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that I think that after expenses, people should be paid at least minimum wage. Well, that's kind of the concept of minimum wage. I agree.
So,
and I'm just saying that the current system that exists is essentially paying people under minimum wage.
Yeah,
absolutely. They're breaking people over the coals.
And I think the way that we need to look at this is, Uber is not only, or Uber or Lyft or whatever, is not only extracting value from the riders, but they're also extracting value from their drivers, right? Because by doing this, by skirting these rules, what they're in effect doing is putting these drivers in a position where they need to subsidize, some of their income via off the taxpayer in effect, right?
Propositioning, yeah.
And so it's a roundabout way for Uber and Lyft to be taxpayer funded, right? Which is just wrong.
Walmart's taxpayer funded.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's another thing that we should set on fire. But Unfortunately, we can't vote on that in this proposition.
And we don't have enough time.
I can do whatever I want when I vote.
I just want to know that. Can I do a write-in on a proposition?
We're just going to change the language on the proposition.
Strike that, put Walmart, strike this.
Yeah, and Abe brings up an interesting point there. The CEO of Uber being worth $2.7 billion. Fuck that guy. I mean...
No, he's not. He has that much money, but he ain't worth, you know.
That's right, yeah.
No, gum stuck on the bottom of my shoe. Fuck that guy.
Another thing, too, about this independent contractor setup, too, is that it really creates an uneven playing field, right? So when you look at a taxi company or a limousine company or that's actually treating their employees like employees, you know, they're obviously going to have much higher expenses than not, you know, treating people properly, and so it really creates an imbalance in the marketplace.
And I agree with you.
Kind of the capitalistic sense.
I agree with you with zero love for the taxi and limousine industry. Like they obviously need to be disrupted. And hey, Gabby, and they obviously need competition, but just because somebody needs competition is not reason enough for us to say, yeah, let's do away with this thing that screws the worker, right?
Correct. I mean, I'm advocating for moving everyone to the same standard.
Yeah,
that's
everybody under the same
standard. It's to a regular.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yep. And yeah, pretty amazing though too, right? $190 million. These basically 4 companies: Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, and Instacart to a smaller degree, have spent a ton of money on this thing.
I know that the amount of money on this is staggering.
Yeah.
So this is Prop 22, and I don't know. I'm voting no.
I'm proud to say I'm voting no.
And I voted.
Well, there we are.